Hi, everyone. Welcome to a clear, fact based breakdown of the United States Venezuela conflict that escalated into airstrikes and the capture of Venezuela's leadership on January 3, 2026. This video explains what happened, why it happened, and what could come next, step by step, without hype. If this kind of deep analysis helps you understand global events better, like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Now let's begin. At 4 a.m. local time, explosions were reported across Caracas, Venezuela's capital. According to multiple international news reports, low-flying U.S. aircraft carried out precision strikes over a 30-minute window. Targets reportedly included Fort Tiuna, Military Complex, Miranda Air Base, La Guaira port facilities. Soon after, electricity failed in parts of southern Caracas. Shortly later, U.S. President Donald Trump announced that Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro had been captured during a special operations mission and taken into U.S. custody. He described it as a completed operation. Venezuela's government called the action a foreign invasion, while opposition groups inside the country described it as a moment of liberation. At the time of recording, more than 200 deaths had already been reported from earlier naval confrontations, though exact figures from the airstrikes remain unclear. This summary is based on information available up to 4:50 p.m. IST, drawn from international media coverage and live reporting sources. But how did things reach this point? To understand today, we have to go back to 1999, when Hugo Chavez became president of Venezuela. Using oil revenues, Chavez nationalized key industries, took control of the state oil company PDVSA, positioned Venezuela against U.S. foreign policy, including opposing the Iraq War. Relations with Washington deteriorated rapidly. In 2002, Chavez survived a failed removal attempt. While rumors suggested U.S. involvement, these claims were officially denied. When Chavez died in 2013, Nicolás Maduro inherited an economy already under pressure. Under Maduro, Venezuela entered one of the worst economic crises in modern history. By 2018, inflation reached 1.7 million%. Over 7.7 million Venezuelans fled the country. Food, medicine, and fuel shortages became widespread. The United States rejected Maduro's 2018 re-election, calling it illegitimate, and supported opposition leadership in 2019. Sanctions followed. Roughly $130 billion in assets were frozen. Venezuelan oil exports dropped by 99%. During President Trump's first term, the U.S. imposed over 300 sanctions, financial rewards for information leading to arrests of senior Venezuelan officials. From 2022 to 2024, the Biden administration slightly eased restrictions to allow negotiations on migration and humanitarian access. But after Trump returned to office in 2024, U.S. policy hardened again. By early 2025, pressure increased, intelligence and enforcement operations expanded. In February 2025, the U.S. designated Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan criminal group, as a terrorist organization following a rise in violent crime linked to its members. Venezuela later agreed to return more than 200 individuals connected to the group. The U.S. also accused Maduro of leading the Cartel of the Suns, alleging that senior military officials were involved in large-scale drug trafficking, claims Venezuela strongly denied. Venezuela's response was clear. This is an excuse to seize our oil, pointing to its 300 billion barrel reserves, the largest in the world. By September 2025, diplomatic warnings turned public. Key developments included closure of Venezuelan airspace to U.S. aircraft, deployment of U.S. naval forces to the Caribbean, increased intelligence activity, higher monetary rewards for information on Venezuelan leadership. In November 2025, a U.S.-led maritime operation targeted suspected drug smuggling routes. Multiple boats were intercepted or sunk, resulting in over 100 reported deaths. Several oil shipments destined for China and Cuba were seized. These naval actions directly set the stage for the January airstrikes. According to U.S. defense officials, air defenses were bypassed. Communication towers and military infrastructure were disabled. Civilian areas were intentionally avoided. Residents reported loud explosions and widespread outages. U.S. authorities announced temporary closure of Venezuelan airspace. President Trump later stated that Maduro was in U.S. custody, calling the operation a decisive blow against drug trafficking and authoritarian rule. Venezuela declared a state of emergency and appealed to the United Nations international courts. Regional allies. Estimated military casualties ranged between 20 and 50, though numbers remain unconfirmed. Opposition figures celebrated publicly, calling it a turning point in Venezuela's history. Why did the U.S. act? Three main reasons. 1. Drug trafficking allegations. The U.S. claims Venezuela was central to cocaine and fentanyl routes. 2. Oil and economic control. Sanctions restricted global oil access. Leadership change could reopen markets. Third, regional security concerns. The U.S. cited election legitimacy, armed groups, and ties with Russia, China, and Iran. Global reactions: oil prices surged nearly 10%. Financial markets shifted toward safe assets. Neighboring countries tightened borders. Emergency meetings were called across the Americas. China, Russia, Cuba, and Iran condemned the operation. European leaders urged restraint. The UN Security Council remained divided. What happens next? Key questions remain unanswered. Will Venezuela stabilize or descend into prolonged conflict? Will external powers become directly involved? Will sanctions ease or expand? What happens to millions of civilians caught in between? One operation has already reshaped the region. The next steps will decide whether this becomes a short intervention or a long war. Was this action necessary, or will it create more instability? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this breakdown helped you understand the situation clearly, like, subscribe, and share. We'll continue tracking every development. Thanks for watching. Stay informed.